early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
This is where the big story lives. And whatever story you think is trending around the world, that's what you can get on our channel. Today, I'm not alone as usual. My partner in shaping policy is also here. Blessing, glad you have joined us.
Good morning.
Good
Femi.
morning. How are you today?
I'm great. I see we've tried to reactivate the camera, the
Yeah,
hidden camera.
It's working now.
And it's a great day because it's Wednesday. And so, like you've mentioned earlier, we're talking about sustainable development goals. How sustainable are the plans to ensure that they're achieved by 2030? We'll talk about this. You know how we say 2030 is just 6 years away? You know, when you say 2030, sometimes it sounds like, oh, it's still very far, sometime in the future. But 6 years can just, go by very fast. And before you know it, will be 2030. And it will be time for countries to begin to evaluate steps that they've taken to ensure that some of the goals are actually achieved. And then to the front burner issue, cutting spendings on arms.
Military spending, yeah.
Military spendings. Well, you raised the question.
Yeah.
How feasible is that given the conflict situation in some of the countries and how they're still very intentional on continuing with the war situation, for instance, Ukraine, Russia, they're still not talking peace yet.
And then the concern is being estimated that since the war broke out, the Ukraine-Russia war, the whole world has had cost to spend more than they've spent in the last 35 years. Since that war broke out, more than billions of dollars have been expended. In fact, according to the estimated, figure, Russia spends between $500 million and $1 billion annually to procure this war. So if you flip the other coin, look at the impact of that on Ukraine, if you get to Gaza, if you get to what is happening in Sudan, even what is happening here in Nigeria,
yes,
you understand that this military spending, it's a necessity. But the concern that United Nations is having is how do we redirect these resources from warfare towards achieving peace and also achieving sustainable development goals?
In my opinion, I think that sounds like treating symptoms and not actually the root cause, because I do not think that anyone would rather spend on ammunition rather than spending on development. But because there's a conflict situation, then it becomes a necessity. You talked about flipping coin. If we flip the coin too, while there are those who are spending the resources that should have been used on development to procure arms, there are those who are benefiting because it's good business at this moment, talking about those who produce these arms. It's business.
The so-called military contractors.
Yes.
They're also smiling to banks.
They're smiling, and it's becoming very lucrative because, hey, people would not pursue peace. They would rather be hostile to one another. And after all the destructions, that's the painful part of it. After all the destructions, sometimes they still come to a round table to negotiate. Someone said that war is a violence negotiation. It's people talking, but this time it's the ammunition that is talking. So at the end of the day, the person whose ammunition, who has more, gets the loudest voice and gets the say at the end of it all. But we can actually prevent that from happening. We're not only ones to talk about this. We have someone who will be joining us virtually to look into the possibility of what the UN Deputy Chief has asked, the possibility of cutting spendings on arms.
Just as we always do, we shape policy and advance development with our conversation. And now to our big story for today. The United Nations has called on global leaders to redirect financial resources from warfare to peace and sustainable development initiatives. The question is, how possible is this, given the fact that some of these nations are going through crisis, talking about what is happening in Russia, in Ukraine, in Sudan, in Gaza, and even in some part of Africa? Let's shift the conversation to our special guest who joins us for the first time on Early Exchange today. He joins us virtually from the United States. We're being joined by Ambassador Roy Okhidievbe, who is a security expert, a military veteran with over 25 years of experience, and is also the CEO, August High Limited. Ambassador Roy, glad you have joined us for the first time on Early Exchange this morning.
Thank you very much. And we seem to be wearing the same kind of outlook. What happened?
Oh, what a good coincidence. Great minds think alike. And I must commend you for staying awake. I learned it's 2 a.m. where you are now in the United States, Texas, precisely. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a sign to show you are the right
Always a
man for this
pleasure.
conversation. So let's
Always a pleasure.
now, the United Nations is calling on global leaders, on nations to redirect financial resources from warfare towards achieving peace and sustainable development goals, meaning that nations will have to cut down on military spending. But the question is, given the fact that the world is battling with global crisis, making reference to what is happening in Ukraine, Russia, Sudan, and the rest of Africa, how realistic is this admonition or this directive from the United Nations? From your military background, give us an experience into how this works out when it comes to military spending, and then looking at this admonition from United Nations. How can nations marry these two extremes?
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure. And I like the angle that you usually take up your narratives. You know, just think back like a few months where we were talking on some TV stations, and I mentioned that the ECOWAS has lost its relevance when the ECOWAS insisted that the country that did a coup d'etat must revert back to the president. I said it's not possible. Now we are losing those countries. ECOWAS is getting dilapidated. Now let's take it up to the United Nations. Those days when I was in the military, so many of us were asked to wear the blue beret and serve in the United Nations peacekeeping force. Don't forget that we had ECOMOG under ECOWAS, and the United Nations hijacked the ECOMOG because the African countries started to quell all the uprisings in African nations, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and put together a body that started to interpret peace to our situations. The United Nations came in, took over the ECOMOG, and it became United Nations peacekeeping force. And I said it then that by the time you begin to look at your relevance and not imputing the relevance of your establishment in the daily lifestyle and in conflict resolution, you will lose it. Now, the United Nations was like represented in also the World Bank, and the human rights, the global human rights concerns. So the United Nations is supposed to handle financing and also handle rules of engagement, laws that stands between I and you and nations to nations. What I should do to you, what I cannot do to you. But if you check the politics of interplay in the United Nations started to veer towards power enrichment for some certain countries, and they began to use the United Nations to oppress other countries within the world and the global setting. And that is where the failure began, because some people became bigger than the laws of the United Nations and they violate human rights. But when others violate human rights, same countries go after the other countries with the United Nations and get them to answer for the penalties. So there must be a balance, or else the United Nations itself cannot pursue this mandate of sustainable global communities.
All right. Now you've talked about there must be some push or some way of trying to create a balance. You talked about balance. In creating that balance, if the go-to for the UN, firstly, is to say countries should cut arms spending, they should do a major cut in arms spending, without addressing or trying to address the cause of the conflict that have necessitated major spendings in arms. Does that look like a doctor trying to treat the symptoms of the patient without addressing the root cause of the disease.
Thank you very much. You see, there is the other day I spoke about reaction and being proactive. Okay. Now we like talking about peace when there is war, and that is totally wrong. I am a fellow in the Institute of Chartered Mediators and Conciliators. Okay. And in Washington, there's an Institute for Human Rights. I'm also a professional in that institute. You know, I'm a certified consultant for human rights. If there is war ongoing, any kind of addressing it by restricting the opportunity of any country to be able to defend themselves, that means you are taking sides. Now, if you see that there is peace, once upon a time, there are times where every country is shielding their arms. They are talking, but they are not fighting. Those are the kind of times that you should come up with such a thing. You know, Russia and Ukraine, they have been together close to a year or over a year now. You know, and everybody thought within 5-6 months, Russia will just squeeze Ukraine together, you know, but it's not happening. And I told them on the TV stations then that it's not happening. Why? Because there are economic considerations. Russia is trying to sell its grains, and other people are trying to also buy weapons from Russia. And Russia has certain weapons too. It must buy from other countries, and it must exchange what it has to be able to buy anything from outside, you know. And there is this protect me, I will protect you mandate also. So the United Nations is not truly properly in the decisions of who carries weapon, who sells weapon, or who manufactures weapons. What the United Nations have been doing over the years is to come out to address abuse of power, not the generation of illicit and dangerous power opportunities. So you build your Tucano jets, you build your kinds of rockets flying, you build your nuclear weapons, you are building it, and they are saying you cannot use it. What kind of funny scenario is that? I'm building nuclear weapons, I'm testing them. Sometimes they do testing, and you say you cannot use it. So I think that there is a gap somewhere with the United Nations and its input. Now, Israel and the Gaza Strip and Palestine, Iran, and every other country in that axis have not taken up arms against themselves, apart from the Russia-Ukraine that is going on. Then you now come up with this policy. Whose side are you on? That will be the question on everybody's mouth.
All right, interesting narrative there. Now, let's look at this side of the story where the United Nations is asking nations to cut military spending, majorly on what you call major arms. I like the fact that you have a military background, which is why this conversation, you are the right man for this conversation. I would like you to give us a picture when it talks about spending on major arms. What does that involve? I would like you to shed more light on that. Then how significant is that to what you call military operations, and then the necessity to cut that kind of spending on major arms? How possible is that?
Okay, by my understanding, most times where a country exists, the country manufactures its own weapons if it has the capability and keeps in storage for any possible use to protect its territorial integrity. The other reason is a country manufactures weapons to sell to others, you know, and sometimes they don't only sell for financial exchange, they sell also for economic advantage, like crude oil, like agricultural products, like medicine. There can be an exchange. Now, the third reason that I know about is you now manufacture or you procure to protect yourself. So at a point where you are under attack, most of your budgeting would be to protect yourself. If you see Nigeria, at a point we got very high in our military budgeting because there was terrorism, there was insurgency in some parts, there was terrorism in so many parts of the country, and our neighbors were getting unfriendly. We had that Bakassi issue with Cameroon. We have Niger coming up with different kinds of alignment with other countries that are not familiar with peace. So all of those things made us to increase our budget. Now, if a country is increasing its budget on military spending, definitely its arm of protecting its fraud must look at those that are within the component of that budget to say, is this figure actually to contain, entertain, and procure certain numbers of equipment as requested? So the other thing you should also consider is when the budgeting for military hardware has gotten to that level, there must also be growing impoverishment. The people will have more poor citizens. Market systems will not be working. The buying power of every citizen in that country will deteriorate because the government is no more investing in productivity for economic lifespan. So instead of me to buy agricultural products, I'm already exchanging them for weapons. Instead of me to manufacture and refine my crude oil, I'm exchanging the crude oil for 10 years ahead, for weapons from another country. The Tucano they bought in Nigeria, we have not used them. And all those money for crude oil that we have invested to procure them. So I'm sure for sustainable global systems, in the procurement of weapons, they must also understand that it overlooks every other necessity because it is assumed that it is to protect the people. So when you have military men on ground and they need to show of force, it is what they have in terms of hardware and software. Don't forget that military weaponry is both hardware and software.
All right. Now, you've talked about what could happen when countries invest more in securing or acquiring weapons rather than attending to development in their country. But this is it. So some governments would actually want to invest or put funds into development that will benefit the citizens. But as you also have made clear, the need for protecting the citizens. So at some point, it seems like protection comes first. While the reasons that needs weapons for protection continues, could you speak to some of the reasons that are fueling the conflict? Earlier, you asked a question, on what side is the UN? Could there be some perception on the side of the warring parties that is fueling this conflict? Perhaps they see the UN as not being fair, or they see some other institutions that could have brokered peace as not being fair, and they feel they can only get justice by themselves.
Thank you very much. You are trying to open up some can of worms. And I know we'll get there, but I didn't think it would have been so fast. Now, you remember the COVID, and you remember the narratives of the COVID. And we finally found out that people just wanted to sell vaccines. And people started coming against the COVID system, and the reasons for global lockdown. So I said, people that manufacture weapons, they definitely are owned by people that sponsor governments in other countries, So if you manufacture weapons, you have to sell it. It must be used for you to prove that it has the capacity and capability that you specified when manufacturing it. If you say a nuclear weapon can shoot from here and get to country like 10 countries away, and it cannot be detected by radar, and it will destroy and kill certain number of people in a city, you have to prove it. And how do you prove it if there is no conflict or crisis for you to use it? So certain people that are into manufacturing of all these weapons, they are the first port of call when you want to look at underlying reasons why conflicts pick up. Now, if you also look at the interest that is beyond military, you will be shocked that for certain countries to sit down together and trying to intimidate another continent, the best way to do that is to make sure they have loggerheads. And once they have loggerheads, they begin to fight. Each party will be calling for assistance, and they will be ready to sign up any kind of alliance with any country that will agree to come in to protect them. That is how certain oil prospecting companies came into Nigeria. After independence, we are supposed to be in charge of everything that we have. As Ukraine is there, I was telling someone the other day, Russia is already signing and already executing alliances that will not favor its country, its financial system, its survivability in years to come. Ukraine is also same way signing alliances with sustainable supply of weaponry and personnel and security intelligence with its own resources. So China is harping on it, globally sitting down and collecting from everybody. India is just there collecting from everybody. So many other countries that have prepared themselves, they have resisted to have conflict with another one, but they have prepared to procure and distribute and supply so many of those things. Most of the things used in the US and some Western countries, they are manufactured in China because of cheap labor and the availability of the industries and the easy processes of export and signing of MOUs. So China opened the door for all of that. So people must protect their interest, and they must create conflicts in places where they want to intimidate. And until you come down to your knees before they will now begin to put in some peace treaty and creating peace to reign. So that is a system. Let me give you an example. In Nigeria, for an example, we had a time when politicians come out to articulate a good speech to prepare themselves to the public what they want to do and what they have done before. Politicians were careful to do things that will be like a history to show that I am capable, I have the capacity, I can do it. But right now in Nigeria, the first thing to do in politics is, before you even come in, you are creating conflict for the existing government. You are making sure there are some crisis somewhere or some crisis somewhere. You are intimidating the agencies, the EFCC, the DSS, all of them. You are trying to put them in a quagmire where they cannot really perform their statutory roles, and they will now become dilapidation. Then some people will move from one party to the other. Look, I like strategy. I've studied strategy a lot. It has helped me to see how people do negative strategic planning. And that is where you cannot uproot crisis and bring in peace. For now, what the world is seeing is systemic sale of weaponry in areas of crisis and instigating crisis to be able to sell your weapons.
All right, interesting. And now let's look at the business side to these. In the midst of this global chaos or insecurity or crisis, there are military contractors who are also benefiting from this. There are businessmen who are like middlemen in between these nations who are making money and smiling to banks. Now, how do we achieve a situation where business concerns are not at the expense of global peace, which is why United Nations is making this outcry now, for us not to have a situation whereby some people allegedly could be making gains, while on the other hand, it's at the expense of global peace. How do we ensure that we have what we'll call a balance here? Because there's this presumption that it's cheaper to pursue peace rather than warfare.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You see, there is this understanding for sale of weapons. Now, if we have peace, the United Nations is supposed to set down policies that will restrict. What we need is to create restrictions of African countries have restrictions. You know, Asian countries, European countries, the Western world, they don't have restrictions. You know, if Nigeria wants to buy bomber jets now, you will hear the United Nations will come and say it will be used against human rights, you know, and they won't sell. And we need to go cap in hand to go and get it. And finally, when we get it, we'll be sending reports on how we are utilizing such weaponry. But do you put the same rules of engagement for Asian countries, European countries, and the Americans and the Western world? It's not possible, you know, because the lawmakers originated from some of these places. So if you can get that done, put down same policy for everyone. Don't make it an animal farm where some animals are more qualified than others. That's one. Two, you must make sure that the use of sustainable development goals exceeds the use for sale of weaponry and personal protection. Personal protection must give way from hardware. If there is infringement in any country, the United Nations must not go to sleep. It goes to sleep when there are infringement, little conflicts that it could hammer on with policies, but it goes to sleep until it generates and degenerates into physical combat. So the United Nations must see those little conflicts, fight against them, institute policies, and maintain a stronghold on those policies. There, we have a world court, you know, the Geneva Convention and all of those things. Who will make sure that they are reviewed upward? Don't forget that there is a dynamic, global dynamic in everything, especially with the input of AI, the input of cyber security and cyber attacks, and the opportunity of the whole world being a global village in the fingertips of anybody that have opportunity to technology. So technology in itself must also have a control, and it must have equal whip for every violator. So if a country is infringing on the right of any other country, before it gets to a crisis period, the United Nations is supposed to hammer down with its rules of engagement. Everybody going to ECOWAS meeting, remember, they are ECOWAS heads of state, and that is not correct. You know, there must be academic and professional people that will represent a country so that the interaction at that level, at that summit, will be favorable towards intellectual, professional, and academic resolutions, not the presidents coming to talk about elongation of their tenure and personal interest. Finally, I want to say that all these security agencies like Wagner Group and all that have now been grown up into personal armies, that opportunity has not been given to Africa. In Nigeria here, the Association of Licensed Private Security Practitioners have been begging to be given license for its members to carry arms. Meanwhile, in America, you just do the level 2, level 3 certifications and you go and buy your gun. You know, you can be a bloody civilian so far you are above 18 and you have done drug tests and whatever. But in Nigeria, we have millions and millions of retired personnel from the police, the army, the DSS, all the military, and they could stand in as approvals to carry weapons and serve private security organizations that are licensed by the Ministry of Interior, the NSCDC, and the overall function of the NSA. Now, we didn't do that. So why won't Wagner Group or whichever come from outside and begin to intimidate us in Africa? Because we have not executed rules that will help our people create internal homegrown security system where we can have our own private security armies.
Talking about roles now, you talked about the UN ensuring that there is control in the global arms industry. If we look at the UN Security Council, the permanent members, there are 5 countries: US, France, China, there is also Russia. These 4 countries, the 5th one of them is the United Kingdom, but 4 of the permanent members of the UN Security Councils are dominant players in the global arms industry. Now, while the UK may not be a dominant exporter, it also has a significant arms industry. So, if you have these members of the UN Security Councils as dominant players in the global arms industry, does it look like, or is there a possibility that the UN will be able to control the global arms industry? Where should it start from? Should it start from having new entrants into the UN Security Council to ensure some balance?
The can of worms that you are trying to open. The process for having members of the Security Council has been sealed already. The members of the Security Council were also in existence when we had NATO come up, North Alliance Treaty. Now, that North Alliance Treaty has also segregated certain countries of the world into its own protective mechanism, where Ukraine is now saying, I want to join. Sweden will say, I want to join, so that I will be protected. So we have AU, African Union, before we now had ECOWAS, to separate the West from other African countries. Remember Brexit, where the European countries were trying to also separate themselves into workable groups. But why can't we have that happening in the areas of protective measures? Instead of having NATO, why can't you say, let's open up membership? You want to go away, you want to go away. Okay, you, both of you, send representatives to come in to the council and become members of decision takers for global peace or global whatever. Now, because they needed that close group, because they have an understanding. Is there a major crisis in France that you see other countries flying weapons into France? The answer is no. Is there a war in America? Now, is there a war in China? Look at all the countries that are there. Russia itself, its own issue started from a long time ago and got escalated after those assumptions that it hacked into the US system during the political politics of that era. Now, so Russia itself has also had issues in NATO, where the countries there in NATO are asking for protection from Russia. So you can now see that Russia itself have elongated its tentacles to African countries asking for relevance and started to give them protection, like using China also as a cover-up and aligning with Islamic states like Iran and other countries. So this has also brought a kind of coloration in the way it has acceptability. And that is the crisis it's facing now. So if you want to bring in any country into the decision takers, you need to expand the membership. Who will do that? Is it African countries that have capacity now that will do that? No. African countries have Africans that are relevant in all of these countries. In America, in everywhere, in the World Bank, we have someone there. Okonjo-Iweala and so many other people have spoken internationally, have international relevance and recognition. But who will give them a space to go into global decision making? It's not ready, and it's not going to happen right now.
Oh my, what an interesting submission. But it should happen, if you agree with me, because Africans should take their destiny into their hands, which will bring me to this question. You talked about the influx of arms to nations like Russia, Ukraine. You're aware of what is happening in Sudan as well. You're also aware of some African countries where you have military administration as we speak. Now, what will be the impact of the influx of arms around this continent, especially Africa now? And what would you expect African leaders, because you've said it might not stop now, but what would you expect African leaders to do? Because if you leave this influx of arms, get into Sudan, you have Burkina Faso where you have a military regime and the rest of them. What should be the call to action on the part of African leaders to tackle this, what I call time bomb?
We have a challenge. I used to tell my staff, I said, procrastination is a killer. If I wake up in the morning and I want to do something, I make sure the sun does not rise before I take concrete decisions and begin to take beginner steps on that thing that I want to do. People say write it down, but me, I don't write down most of the time. I act out. Instead of me to say, I will wear that shirt, I will wear this shoe, I wear it. I just pick it up and I wear it. So where we need to understand, let's break it down. I like to start from Nigeria because I want us to have a local knowledge of what's happening outside. When there is time for elections, you see that not everyone, biased political players, let's use that word, right? Okay, they buy arms and they equip their members of hoodlums and gangsters that they want to use to snatch ballots, buses, to intimidate opponents. So once there is a rally going on, you journalists, you have been stabbed, so many of you have been shot, during political rallies. And you see the police taking cover with you behind a vehicle. And these hoodlums take over the rally, ransack everything, and walk away. Even the ones that are arrested, they are released later. After any of the political party, no one is innocent, because all the key players in all our political parties today, they have moved from point A to point B. So the people in APC, the people in Labour Party, the people in PDP, the major parties in Nigeria, they have all moved around. So they have tested waters. But the pain is that they have armed these boys and they don't recover the weapon from them. They have made these boys to intimidate the police, the DPO and all that. They have not recovered the integrity of those police DPO and those police officers that are supposed to handle policing. We that are military people, we see these same people come into the barracks to come and see your commander, and they walk away. So the agreement to arm any kind of non-state actor, gangs, and give them privileges to intimidate state actors, military, police, or whatever, that are supposed to protect the people. And you find them collecting taxes, and the government is also collecting taxes from the same citizen, paying taxes to gangsters and to government. Now, look at it globally. Every time there is a crisis in the world, the people used to fight mostly are mercenaries. They come from different countries, sign up, and are paid attractive allowances, and they get recruited, they get armed, and they are used. Now, they too train people locally. In Niger now, there's Russia and whatever, they are training a lot of people. Wagner Group are training a lot of people in all those countries, African countries that said they don't want to become members of ECOWAS anymore. Now, when they now have peace, those people you train, the language they understand is violence. And you have not recovered the weapons from them. You have not shown them the workability of measures in your country to keep peace. So in global setting, the United Nations have not shown any route to intimidate the would-be world powers. And those world powers have continually been able to arm insurgency in any country of their choice of interest, and they don't withdraw those arms. So it's a circle. This circle must continue until something necessary happens in the ability of a global body coheres together to create peace, to become able to implement and execute decisive measures.
So what would be that necessary thing that should happen as it is? Because it looks like a dilemma. The countries are still at war. For instance, Russia and Ukraine are still at war. Israel, Gaza, the war is ongoing. And in other parts of the world, there are pockets of conflict. While they're ongoing, to say cut down your budget is like saying become defenseless. They cannot become defenseless because there is need to beef up defense. At the same time, they have development issues to attend. What necessary thing needs to happen if the common body that should broker peace seems to be appealing because not much can be done? What can be done? China on its own have been asked or been used to influence Russia to de-escalate. That has not worked. In Africa, the ECOWAS already have some form of disintegration. So what can happen? In the Israel-Gaza instance, the U.S. has been accused of playing an unfair game by siding with Israel. So who can play that role of peaceful resolution?
It may surprise you. It may surprise all of us. But before I go there, let me tell you something. There is currently a dilapidation on the capacity of many countries that we thought were very strong. If you look at Russia and Ukraine, some of you must have betted that it's not going to hit 6 months, you know. And when I was talking on air then, people said, what are you saying? What are you saying? That Russia can command alliances. Yes, but at a cost. At a cost. You know, so gradually, the cost of running the war or the wars that we face country to country begins to eat deep on things that were making us relevant to other countries. So was it steel? Was it petroleum products? Was it industries? You know, was it our position? Are we in between certain countries that were used as a transit point? Was it military alliances where, like America, have a lot of their troops in so many countries? France had their troops in African countries. I think they are being ejected now. I don't know if they have been sent away from back to their countries. You know, so there are so many kinds of interest: economic, manufacturing, raw materials, affiliation, sharing, alliances. If they want to fight me, two of us will fight them, and all those kind of things. It is eating deep into those countries that we thought were the strong men. So there is a quiet and intentional penetration, underground, underlining penetration into the fabric of the countries that the whole world thought were very strong. And that intentional penetration is eating directly to look for the necessary pillar that holds those countries together, and they won't pull it down. So that country will be existing, but it has to be at the beck and call of another country or two other countries that you thought were not strong enough. So they will penetrate those people and make them dependent on them. You know, if you go to certain countries now, let me give you an example. Most of the people that handle IT, AI, technology, and cyberspace, cyber security, or whatever, they are Indians or Asians. They are not really indigenous of that place. If you go to some countries, if you look at manufacturing, most of the places you go, Nigeria, America, want to manufacture something. Even our Igbo brothers that are manufacturers, most of them, because of the environment, they take their things to China and Asian countries to manufacture it there and bring it back to sell. So gradually certain countries that are focused on relevance, they are now positioning themselves to be a global mandate on certain things that becomes the survivability quotient for any country. So where do we find ourselves? We'll find ourselves very soon where we will see mighty countries, but certain countries can blow a whistle and they'll begin to wag their tail. So I'm not the one to mention those countries anyway. I know you know because you guys are very intelligent.
All right, interesting. Now, let's redirect this conversation to our immediate constituency, which is Nigeria now. I like the fact that going by your antecedent, you served in the Nigerian military. I would like you to give us a picture of what is playing out in the Nigeria. I mean, when it comes to disposition to military spending. As allocated in the 2024 budget, 6.7 trillion naira for defense and security. Correct me if I'm wrong, I perceive that's the highest so far. Now, how will you describe military spending in Nigeria and as also the welfare to military officers, then the issue of arms in Nigeria? What has been your experience as a player in this industry or in this terrain? Even though you're retired, but your experience is still there. I would like you to share your experience with us when it comes to military spending in Nigeria and the welfare of soldiers.
I didn't know we'll get to this point. Okay. Unfortunately, we cannot run away from it because we see it every day. So many of us are related to military people, and so many of us survive from even military veterans. So many military veterans now have been able to put food on the table for people that their governors cannot take care of. Right now, we have under August I Christian Ventures, my concerns, we have over 1,000 people, human beings, with wife and children that look to the end of the month from our activities to have something to eat, and these platforms does not help us when we look at the inability to continue making that possible for them to have something to eat. Let's take it to military weapons. When I was in the military, I think it was around my time that we were asked to hand over the G3 rifle. There's a rifle called G3 rifle to the customs. That was the time that customs were having issues with smugglers. And we were asked to hand over the G3 rifle to the customs. And I think they brought Kalashnikov and AK-47 that time, and going by the current, let's use 30 years, let's roll it back 30 years. The budgeting for military, my brother, it has not been used to empower the military to crush non-state actors. It has not been used. What we use our budgeting for is to negotiate peace. There is a viral video. See, I don't like talking about things that it makes me cry, because I know my colleagues are there and they are dying every day. The ones that are not dying, their minds have been corrupted to the point where they begin to find themselves making criminal deals, and they are arrested and dismissed. So many military people are in detention right now, and they are facing court-martial for one infringement or the other. But the government is the one that is supposed to be facing court-martial. The chief of defense staff, the minister of defense, they are the ones that are supposed to be facing court-martial. Let's look at the video that was going viral. I don't know if you have it. You can play it anytime if you have it, where the minister of defense or whoever got into his vehicle on a roadblock. Soldiers were hailing him, Babao, Babao, brought bundles of money from his car, bundles of money, and gave it. Say, who is the team lead? and gave it to them to share. How did you have that kind of money in your car? How can you be driving with that kind of money in your vehicle? How can you, a high-profile government authority, stopped by a soldier's checkpoint, hungry guys, that their ROCA, ration cash allowance, have not gotten to them? You cannot even deal with the officers that have withheld their cash allowance, because you need those officers to be in your alliance. So any criminal thing they are doing, you are protecting them already. So you gave those soldiers those bulk money for them to share at their beat once. You are giving them fish. You are not giving them a net to fish for themselves. Why did you not insist that the ration cash allowance gets to them and the ROCA is paid as at when due? Why can't you get there and give them your phone numbers and say, your ration cash allowance is how much? They will say, sir, it's 2,000 naira. It's supposed to be 5,000. Take this number. By next week, if you have not gotten 5,000 naira paid on so and so date every month, then you get back to me through this number. And that's all. You can even put 3 or 4 numbers of your selected personnel that you trust. But you go there, you are giving them bundles of money, abusing our financial system. The EFCC, can they arrest you for that? No. That's one. 2, the procurement system that we have, the abuse on the procurement system over the years. That procurement system is now where civilian members of our military hierarchy and the military members of our military hierarchy settle themselves. So since they can get billions of naira to share before they leave service, some of them go back into politics. You don't blame them. They must survive. And some of them become ambassadors because of what they know. They are given another role to be protected. And they do all of these things without ensuring that the veteran community have a stable and viable environment. So there's no continuity in the veteran community unless you see them coming out to protest, and to protest. Now, all of this procurement system in the military, they have so abused it that it does not insist on military might. Military might is not only the gun, the armor tank, the jet fighter. No. Military might is also the mindset of the fighting troop, the soldier. As he stands up to wear his uniform and carry his weapon, how does he think in his mind? How does he feel in his emotion? How does he shoulder his challenges, his wife, his children, and other extended family challenges? Does he have capacity? Is there an environment for his health concern if he has any health challenge? Meanwhile, you have also seen videos. No, you can Google all of these things where soldiers leave front line, go to their village to go and find treatment for bullet wounds. How? With all the billions that you have seen released? Let me tell you a shocking thing too. There are those we call medically onboarded. There are soldiers that their monies were cut down because they had injuries and they needed to be retired. It's not my fault. I'm not in my village, in my father's house. I'm fighting for my country. I got injured. My exit allowance will be slashed, and that is part of the protest that we had last time. Remenaf, the retired members of Nigerian Armed Forces, we could not do it alone. We have to call other people, and we now had the CCV, Coalition of Concerned Military Veterans. Now we have Welfare Committee, Remenaf Welfare Committee, with a 5-man committee still talking to the same Ministry of Defense people that do not have any level of empathy to understand that the might and the mindset of the veteran gives credibility to my loyalty and patriotism as a fighting soldier. So in Nigeria currently, the military that you have is the one that goes through the governors, through the MIs, the pastors, the local government chairmen to settle the bandits so that they won't kill people. So they are the ones that go to settle them. You have seen the videos, my brother. So they settle them, they make peace with them because they don't want them to come in to fight people. So you will see a negotiator like Gumi talking to bandits, and police officers will be standing behind him with guns, and the bandits will be standing behind their boss with guns. Now, a bandit kingpin is even asking people to send account number because of the way the country is, that he wants to give them money. So we are already in a challenging situation where we have not been able to deploy our military contingency financial planning to attack the necessities to strengthen our military, protect our territorial integrity, and have a proper veteran community that will be enviable in the eyes of Nigerians to be able to rush in to join the services. And you will have the quality of personnel that will join the services. So right now, our military budget is comatose in the pockets of those that have held the country to ransom. And that is one of the exit points of our financial integrity of Nigeria.
All right. Finally, for me, there have been areas that have been declared, the Nigerian military have declared victory over. We find that they say the military has been able to deter bandits in particular area or overpower them. But we find that after a long while, the inhabitants of that region that fled are still unable to return there. As of 2023, there were over 3.3 million internally displaced persons in camps at different locations in Nigeria. Some of them are still there as we speak because they've been unable to return to their areas. Agreed, there are challenges with the military in terms of the effective deployment of funds budgeted for the military. But there's also the issue of infiltration. There have been said or stories of infiltration of the Nigerian army, leading to officers being ambushed in areas where they should be protecting. And that's also even deterred some from remaining in the force. What is the way forward here?
Okay, we are going to address two things now. The two things that we're going to address are this. Number one, we are going to address why there's infiltration in the military. Number two, we are going to address why people, IDPs, and lifestyle cannot return back to areas that were routed by bandits, even after military claims that they have displaced those bandits or terrorists or non-state actors and have claimed back those places. But normal lifestyle has not resumed. Let's look at the first one. Why do we have moles in the military? Let me tell you something. In my time, I have a Muslim, a Christian, a Yoruba, a Hausa, an Igbo, all of us in one patrol vehicle. In one patrol vehicle. The Igbo guy will call him Yamiri, and everybody will laugh. The Hausa guy will call him Boki, and everybody will laugh. You know, we from Edo, my dad is from Edo State, and they will call us Anini brother, you know, and everybody will laugh. You know, we take it as a joke, and we enjoy our community for protective measure. If I'm engaging, we call it arc of fire. If this is my arc of fire, and I'm engaging the enemy, and I'm shooting, any sound I hear behind me, I don't get bothered. Why? Because I know that Kunle or Emeka or Ibrahim is behind me, and I'm 100% sure that nothing will touch me behind, because I'm engaging my arc of fire, and I'm sure that he's doing that. Even when your commander is a Muslim and a Hausa guy, and the 2IC is an Igbo guy, you will see cohesion, military professionalism. You will so love to join the service. You will so love to fight and die with that team. And that is what gives us victory, even in international jobs. But tell me, where can you survive when the people that are supposed to approve, allocate, and supervise your welfare and every other thing that comes to you start to use ethnicity, religion, and political influence to separate you? The same leaders in Nigeria that want us to have a strong military, they are the same leaders that are using ethnicity and religion to weaken the military. Why? They are afraid of coup d'etat. So because they are afraid of coup d'etat, they strategically try to limit the cohesiveness and the strength of the military so that the military cannot take over power because they are not ready to deliver governance. So we have that challenge going on. So when they want to recruit in the military, somebody makes a phone call and you see a list of 20, 30, 40 people coming from one place claiming that they are from this, they will come with local government identification, everything false, and they get into the military and they are deployed to choice locations. And most of them are even promoted beyond and above those that have experience, capability, and necessary skills deployment. Now, you will see that disloyalty will begin to creep in. Another dangerous thing that our government used to do is to promote somebody to the chief of army staff and retire compulsorily all his seniors in the Nigerian Defense Academy. Immediately you do that, all the soldiers attached to those seniors that you are retiring compulsorily, they become disloyal in their spirit to the leadership of that young man that you have made the chief of defense staff or the chief of army staff. Because the Oga I want to die for, he didn't commit any offense. He didn't steal government money. He doesn't have more than one car. He doesn't even have a house in his village. And that same Oga, you now retire him because you promoted your own guy. So the political class, they are really coming into the military and really displaying a lot of mismanagement. So let's look at the other side. We talked about why people can't return. For your information, immediately there is a crisis in a location.
Love to do that quickly because we need to wrap up now. Just a few seconds. Just take your second.
I will wrap up that. I appreciate you. Once there is a crisis in any state or region, the DSS supposed to penetrate that place. The police have their own intelligence unit. They're supposed to penetrate that place. They are the ones that are supposed to look at the number of enemies, non-state actors, where they are hibernating, what kind of weapons they have and everything, and feed back to the military. The Air Force can immediately initiate air attack. If it's waterline area, the Navy or the military comes and put boots on ground. Now, if they don't do that, the military comes in haphazardly. You hear of collateral damage of people and everything. They destroy that place, they take over the land, and the military has to withdraw. When the military is withdrawing, the other state actors like the police, the DSS, they are supposed to take over that place, create a civil relationship with the people, and ensure that life comes back to normal. But that is not also done in Nigeria because we fold our hands to grab the money that we use to sponsor the IDP camps. Thank you very much.
All right. We must commend you for your time and commitment. No doubt it's a developing issue. We'll have another time, to have your intervention on this issue. But we must thank you for your thoughts and for your submission on this topic and even taking time. We had to practically wake you up to be part of this conversation. Thank you so much for this commitment and your dedication.
Thank you.
Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.